Welcome, Floodgate family, to a unique and special edition of Improving Live. I'm Danny Searin, joined here today by Karen McClung. We're going to be discussing one of the top questions over the last 30 years we get consistently from candidates, whether you just graduated college or maybe you're a few years, 5 years, 10, 15 years into your career, and you want to break into this desirable industry of whether it's MedTech, med device, or just medical altogether. It could even be pharmaceutical. So we're going to strap in here for the next 30 minutes and talk deep details. We're going to dumb it down, start to finish, how to get in, how to format your resume, and ultimately land the job through interviewing. Before we get into any of that, though, as I mentioned, 30 years in MedTech, this is all we do. So we're definitely uniquely qualified to talk about this. But Karen, she's got a background prior of getting into getting into recruiting in medical sales and hiring herself. And we surveyed dozens of hiring managers that we work with on their thoughts of what they look for in candidates when they're breaking in. So tons of different stuff to talk about. Before we get into any of that, though, Karen, you're going to be doing most of the talking today. Tell the audience about yourself and your background.
Absolutely. So, like many of you, I also chose to break into the industry many years ago, where I started my career with some insurance sales. I went into commercial insurance sales. I learned how to sell. I learned how to knock on doors. I learned how to face rejection and ultimately learned how to win and put up numbers. And so I got that outside sales experience and then talked to everybody that I possibly could about the industry. And ultimately broke into, for me, it was the pharmaceutical side. And when I broke in, I was able to then have a really successful career, hit a few major milestones in a really short amount of time, and ended up being a divisional sales manager for about 10 years of my 12-year career there. So I really have done a whole lot of not only being in your shoes, looking for those jobs myself, going into that B2B sales experience, but also hired a ton of people and coached and developed them into the careers that those individuals wanted as well.
It's a unique perspective and one that we're appreciative to have, having seen it from both sides, breaking in yourself and then doing the hiring, and now even seeing it from a tertiary point of view and being that sort of that conduit between the company and the candidate. So
exactly.
Tons of value to provide. So to start things off, let's start all the way back in the beginning. Like I said, say I'm a candidate, I'm an individual, maybe I just graduated college, maybe I've got a few years experience, maybe I've got 5 years experience, and for whatever reason, I've got a passion. I found out, I learned about maybe from a family member or friend, medical sales, and I want to break in. What is the first thing that I need to just go and do when embarking upon this audacious goal?
Yeah. And it's a great goal, right? The industry is growing, it's fascinating, it's exciting, and ultimately the first thing you have to do, and we hear this day in and day out from the hiring managers that we work with, is get some good outside sales experience. Mm-hmm. You got to go out there, you got to, just like I said in my career, you have to get your teeth kicked in, you got to face rejection, and you've got to put numbers up. So, and as you do that, as you're going through and you're winning, you also need to document that. You need to have those successes that you can go into those interviews, ideally, when you get that down the road. And you got to be able to talk about, this is how I achieved this. This is how I won. These are the times that I failed, and here's what I learned from it. So really, what you're doing is you're creating you're having those experiences and you're creating your resume based on those experiences. So I would say absolutely you start with outside sales experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if nothing else, it pressure tests you just as much. Mm-hmm. Do I want to be in a sales role? Am I cut out for this? We talk to a decent amount of people that think they want to get in, then they do go get an outside sales role and figure, I'm not cut out for sales, and that's okay too.
Absolutely.
Figure that out sooner. Okay, so any top companies or type of companies I should be looking for on the business to business sales side?
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head, right? First, you start with business to business. And so the first thing I would personally do is Google top B2B sales organizations, right? So the things that we look for a lot of times, payroll services. So the ADPs of the world, Paycor. Like I said, I was in the insurance side of things. So commercial insurance, anywhere that you're having to do that outside selling of business to business. Other companies that we've talked to, gosh, copier sales. That's always a big one, especially if in your medical career, you want to potentially sell medical equipment, for example, because it's so transferable and translatable.
Love it. One other thing is a sort of a side tangent. Medical sales college, if you're looking to break in, it's something that might have. What are your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure, if you are willing to commit not only your time, but your finances to medical sales college, that's going to give you a leg up without question. You're going to learn how to talk the talk. You're going to gain the experience of anything from the orthopedic side to any type of industry experience that you want for medical sales college. So for sure, I think go for it again if you have the means in order to make that happen.
Yeah.
Because when you go into the interview process, you're going to have a leg up. You're going to have that experience.
Yeah, and we've spoken before to the medical sales college administrative staff, great people. They've got a great program. Again, if you have the resources, one of the things I think they uniquely have is if you don't have a network, maybe you're young, they will give you the training, but they'll also connect you with the right people at some of those larger organizations to then get your foot in the door.
Yes.
So it's never a bad thing, but don't think of it as, oh, if I can't afford that, I have no chance of getting into medical sales. That's definitely not the case.
Exactly.
So
you got it.
Awesome. Okay, so now I've gotten my couple years of experience. I've won President's Club, Rookie of the Year, whatever it may be. And now I'm starting to say, okay, I think the time is now. I'm ready to break in. What types of jobs should I be looking for?
Great question. So as a whole, in the industry, most of the entry level positions are going to be associate level roles. So you'll look at things like associate OR rep, or you might look at, if you're looking in biotech or pharma, you're going to look at a territory representative role. And you are going to get that experience so that you can crack open the door and prove yourself there, and then move your way up into higher level positions if that's your goal.
Yeah, anything with the word, I think in MedTech, associate is a good role to go. Associate territory manager, clinical territory associate, associate sales rep, territory sales associate. Anything with that word, not always, but typically is going to be the one where they don't require medical experience, and that's where you can, if you're looking on job boards, which we'll get into, use that keyword of associate to break in.
Yeah, and on that note, medreps.com is a great resource. We post some of our jobs on that board, and they also just have a wealth of knowledge and information for breaking into the industry, or other tips and tricks from resumes to LinkedIn, all the things we're going to talk about today.
And is there any, before we go further, we're talking type of position, right, associate, should I narrow into a specific vertical like orthopedics or cardiology, or maybe even size of company, or is there one area that's easier to break into than others?
I don't think so. I mean, not from what I've seen. Ultimately, you want to take any opportunity that you can get to break in. And so it's not the time really to be picky. You want to go in and you want to prove yourself. And the only way to do that is to say yes to the opportunity in hand.
Yeah, no, I love it. I couldn't agree more. So we've gotten our experience. Now we're starting to survey the market. We see some open opportunities, but before we go out and apply, we need to make sure we've got our resume and our LinkedIn in order, right? And a wise man once told me that if you're going on a job search, it's like you're launching a product, just you're the product, and your resume is your, marketing material, your brochure, and your LinkedIn is like your website. So we want to optimize those. How do you go about that daunting task?
Yeah, well, and that's a great question. And something that I always encourage is start with Google. I mean, back in the day, there were encyclopedias. Now we've got Google. It's everything's at our fingertips. So you want to make sure that your resume is prepared. It's got no spelling errors. It outlines the experiences that you have. And also, probably not a good idea to keep like that bartending job that you had in high school, or waitressing job. Make sure it tells the story of who you are. Make sure you have clear bullet points of what your job was, but most importantly, what you've achieved at that role that you're currently in. Again, should be a sales job of some sort. So make sure that you're highlighting your wins. What did you achieve? Did you get that Rookie of the Year? If you did, make sure that that stands out. I think I mentioned already spelling, but also check your grammar. And when you save your resume, save it with your first name, your last name, and the word resume. Make it as easy as possible for people to find you when they're going through and sifting through that pile of resumes. You want them to be able to find you in their inbox, or if they're old school and print it out like I like to do things, well, then you want to make sure that it's very easy to find you.
Yeah, no, that's great. And what about, and I think sometimes people, you mentioned the other jobs, like they get scared that maybe I don't have a ton of experience and my resume kind of looks blank. How do maybe other things I've done in my past, or is there anything else I should be putting on?
I mean, I think if you are volunteering in the community or you have athletic experience that shows that you're a true competitor, like we had a hiring manager we talked to just the other day who was so impressed that we had a national wrestling champion that we presented to him for a B2B, level experienced role and entry level into medical. So any of that shows that you're a fighter, that you're hungry, that you've got grit, any kind of experience like that is extremely valuable when it comes to the interview and hiring process.
Awesome. And then transitioning that over, we talked about resume or LinkedIn. How do I go about formatting them?
Yeah, very similar, right? Check your spelling, make sure you stand out. If you have people who can share recommendations, right? It's going to add credibility. It's not the only thing that people are going to look at. They're going to look at your experience, your background, what you've achieved. So do make sure that whatever is that you're showing on LinkedIn is professional, helps you stand out. And most importantly, and we say this to every candidate, I feel like, is have a good, clean headshot. Get rid of the picture of you with, a friend in your photo or a cocktail or something from your favorite wedding. You want to look like the professional that you aim to be when you break into the industry.
Yeah, can't agree more. On the same sort of vein of social media, LinkedIn is obviously a social media site and where you're gonna obviously market yourself with.
Yeah.
But everybody's got Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, whatever it may be.
Oh, yeah.
Should I format those in a way? How do I attack that?
Oh, and that's a perfect question. Something that we also see gets people into trouble sometimes, right? So do make sure that you look back at your social media and clean it up. If it's not private already, make it private, especially if you've got, those times that you were in college and you were out partying or things that if you don't want grandma to see it, it's pretty much a good rule of thumb that you also don't want the hiring managers to see that information about you. And I can promise you, there are hiring managers that go full detective.
Yeah, and I would say as a good rule of thumb, just try, and a lot of people don't do this, just try Googling your full name.
Yeah.
And your location if you've got a common name, right? And just see what comes up. And when you do, if there's things you don't want there on the first few pages, figure out a way to get them off of there.
Yes.
Because that's definitely going to be something somebody does. Okay, go, awesome. So now I've got my experience. I built out my resume. I understand the type of position I want. Now it comes to the sort of inevitable point of I've got to start applying to these jobs.
Yeah.
Right? We talked about some of the job boards, maybe going into more depth there, but what else can I do outside of just clicking the apply button and hoping that I hear back?
Yeah, and that's a sure way to not feel really good about yourself, right? When you post and pray, we kind of talk about it, is like you apply and you apply and you apply and you try to put that round peg in the square hole. It just doesn't work, right? So instead, you want to do a few things. First, research those companies and those opportunities that have those associate level positions. And let's go back a little bit and think about how you can truly network your way in, because we know as recruiters that if we make a recommendation of a candidate, they're going to be moving to the higher end of the totem pole, so to speak, in terms of interviews and in terms of opportunities. So if you want to really excel and break into this career, find anyone and everyone that you can that are either at the companies you want to work with or are in the position that you hope to break into for yourself. So what does that look like? And I asked a couple of my hiring manager friends that are still doing this every day of their lives. And they said the first thing that they would do is absolutely network like crazy, right? So what does that look like? On LinkedIn, you have this incredible tool. So you can say, hey, I'm looking to break into the medical field and I love the cardiology space. So now you start looking for companies in that particular vertical and in that space And now you friend request or connect is what we do on LinkedIn, right? A friend request is what you do on Instagram or Facebook. I got this, guys. But so you send out a connection request on LinkedIn and introduce yourself. Have that quick elevator speech ready. So, hey, I am 2 years of B2B sales. I'm looking to break into the cardiovascular market. Would love to pick your brain on the culture of your company and what's made you super successful there. And if they will respond to you, and a lot will, because they've been in your shoes themselves and have probably done these same things, right? When they do, make it a two-way street. See what you can offer them of value. And most importantly, when you ask those key questions that you want to understand about their company or their experience, be sure that you follow up with some kind of gratitude, right? That could be a thank you note. That could be just, hey, you suggested that I read this book. I read about precise selling, for example, and I put it into my wheelhouse. So now I'm navigating the job search. Not only am I using it in my sales job now, but I'm also using it as I apply and search for those positions.
That's awesome.
So
yeah, I love that. I mean, finding ways to connect and pursue the opportunity through somebody that already works there,
yes,
rather than just going into that pool of applicants. And I think the number is 81% of roles today are still filled via one's own network. And so you could be the greatest candidate ever, and unfortunately, if there's somebody knows, that takes precedent, right? And so finding ways to make those connections up front and be one of those people is to pursue it as an internal referral and as a referral. So you don't have to be their best friend.
you got it.
You just have to make a good impression, show your value, and then break in. I think that's great.
Yeah.
Perfect. So now I've applied. I'm starting to hear back. Right. I'm getting some traction. I'm not getting. I don't think we're thinking you're going to get hundreds, but maybe I have a few interviews lined up for my first couple of weeks heading into the interview. It's unique interviewing in the med device world. Do I need to be an expert on their products? It can be intimidating. How do I navigate that interview process?
Great question. And preparation is key, right? With anything that you do, you want to go in as prepared as possible. So, do I think you can know too much about the company or the products? No, you absolutely can't. So, take the time and do your diligence. The other thing is before you walk into that interview, dress like you already have the job, right? Your background was in making sure that people looked their best before you came over to this side of the industry in recruiting. So dress like that true professional, right? If you have that question about it, it may not be the right thing to wear. So dress professionally. And then remember to bring actual hard copies of your resume. In this day and age, most people will have your resume already on an electronic version. But do make sure that again, it's about owning the job before you've got it. So you want to have those copies of your resume. The other thing, and I promise you I've seen this in interviews, put your cell phone away, turn it off. You don't want that thing going off. Your friend's latest update is probably okay to wait for until you leave, right? So that's really important. And then I would say you asked a little bit about what kind of research should I do? Well, one question that you're going to get asked probably every single time is, why do you want to break into this industry? Why are you interviewing for our company? So you want to have a good answer ready for that, not just that blasé, like, well, I've always wanted to do that. And how often do we hear that?
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah, every single day of our lives, right? So you want to think of ways that you can truly stand out. Is that writing a 30, 60, 90-day plan? Is it going in and sharing how you achieved those awards that you have? Whatever that is that makes you that unique individual and makes you memorable, that's what you want to do.
Yeah, and a couple of things I'd add there. You mentioned hard copy of resume. I think any sort of brag book or showing of accomplishments, any extra preparation you can do is going to be key, and not just showing your achievements, but showing your commitment to this role, showing your professionalism, because ultimately that's how it's going to translate into you going into a sales call, right?
Yeah.
And that's what they're interviewing for.
Absolutely. And on that note, one of the most important factors in the whole interview process is not while you're in front of the hiring manager, but when you leave. You want to make sure that you write that either a handwritten note following with a thank you that says something about what you took away from that interview opportunity. Was there something personal that manager shared with you that makes their top reps the most successful people? Is there something about their kids or their dogs? Whatever that is, tie that in. It just makes you more memorable.
Mhm.
And if it's not handwritten, that's totally fine. Send an email, do it quickly. We always say do it within about 24 hours. I say do it within 2 hours.
Mhm.
And in the subject line, say thank you from Danny or thank you from Karen, your next rep. Whatever that sounds like for you and fits your personality, do make sure that you do the thank you note, because we always hear about the people who don't send the thank you more than we hear the
Oh, yeah.
ones that actually do.
Mhm. Yeah, and don't overthink it, right? It's to your point. Maybe put something personal in there. Say, reiterate your interest and looking forward to the next steps. You mentioned something that brought up a question. And by the way, everybody, I've been remiss to not say, as we wrap up here the next couple of minutes, we're going to be fielding questions. So be sure to drop questions and leave over on the right side in the comments, and we'll jump into those for anything we haven't covered. As I'm in the interview process, any types of questions I should be asking, because I think a lot of people, they're breaking in, but they just don't know a ton about the industry, and so they don't know how to ask questions and also properly vet out an opportunity to see if it's right for them.
Yes, and those are great questions too, Danny. And look, I see you here. Those are great questions too. And ultimately, you have to ask the questions that are important to you, right? So, is this a startup opportunity? And what does that really mean? Look that up before you go in, because you don't want to seem like you are unprepared or unaware, right? So, you want to know that. You want to know what has made the career success for the hiring manager you're talking to. What's made them successful? What advice would they give to somebody who is in your shoes or in your seat in the interview process? Really, any question that allows for you to better understand call points you're calling on or the types of physicians you're calling on. And a lot of that reconnaissance work can be done prior to entering. So if, for example, you know that you're going to be calling on pulmonologists, well, then do some legwork up front and see what a pulmonologist actually does for patients, and be aware so that when you go in, you can really provide some value in the interview process.
I think it's great. And thinking about it too, don't be afraid to ask the more broader strategic level questions. Hey, where is this company and this role going in 6 months, 5 years from now?
Yes.
How can I come in and make an impact quickly that'll ultimately help you build your team long term? Things like that show that you're not just in it just to break in, but it's like, I want to be part of this for the long haul. And it helps you if they say, hey, we're looking to be sold in 2 years and this is going to be a quick sprint. Well, hey, it might not be for you, or it might be for you, but at least you come in eyes wide open. So asking those broader level questions, I think, are impactful.
Absolutely.
So awesome.
Great.
And we'll jump into questions here in a second. I'll have Sarah, our screen died here, so I'll have you flip them over. I've got one here from Richard that came via LinkedIn comments. So thank you, Richard. So we've talked a lot about folks that are just looking to break in and maybe they just graduated college or they're early in their career. But what about somebody who's got already 16 years or more or just a little less of business to business sales experience? A, is that something companies value? And then B, how do I use that and leverage that to break into the industry?
Yeah, and that's a great question. Thanks for offering it to us. So really, it's not that different than what we've just discussed. You just have the benefit, Richard, of coming in with greater experience. If you have a track record of success, awesome. That's going to help you stand out. And ultimately, like any opportunity that we have, there are nuances that each manager desires for their team. So they're looking at more things than your experience and your background. They're looking at, how does this individual potentially help fit the culture of our company? How will they help drive business forward? So I think that your odds are similar to somebody that's coming out in 2 to 3 years. The difference is you then come in and sell that value of what that 16 years of experience brings, and make sure that you have that high energy, that high impact, that hunter mentality, and have those examples that you can share. As long as you have that, my assumption would be that you'd have every bit as good of a chance, if not a better chance, of landing that next opportunity.
Yeah, and we're looking at whether you're early in your career, mid your career, late in your career, is about knowing your value and what the company is looking for and how your value can add to that. And so going in armed with that and saying, hey, here's the experience I've got, here's how this can impact you and your company, and how I'll leverage it. So just having that tight story down and really understanding the opportunity, I think, I mean, as we've spoken about,
Yeah.
that B2B experience is crucial and is key in being able to speak to your successes over the last 16 years, because I'm sure you've got a ton, will ultimately give you the best chance to win.
And remember too that timing is everything,
Mhm.
right? So that is why you have to recognize that this is not a sprint when you're getting and you're breaking in. It's a marathon. So you have to put one foot in front of the other. There's going to be times that are difficult. There's going to be times that you feel like you're on top of the world. But ultimately, if that is your end goal, then see it through.
Yeah, I mean, think about it like a sales call, right?
Yeah.
It's time, it's pressure, and it's effort, and putting your best foot forward every day. That's what it's all about.
Got to
So,
put in those repetitions for sure.
and it's definitely worth it again. Sarah, our screen's dead here. Could you turn around your laptop? Sorry.
All right.
Some questions. All right, so the first one's from Morgan. What can a new medical device sales rep expect in their day-to-day responsibilities? So if I'm breaking in, what does maybe those 30, 60, 90 days look like in the beginning, and how is it going to differ from a job outside of medical?
You know, a lot of it up front depends on the company, of course. So, one thing that you can expect as you enter the industry is that you're very likely going to have some really stellar training. So, you would spend time learning things from, gosh, it could be anatomy and physiology. It could be, the industry itself. It's diving in and getting an in-depth picture of call points, of the types of physicians you're calling on, or nurses, or whoever that provider is that you would be selling to. You're going to learn as much as possible up front. So again, it's dependent on that actual company that you're working for. Some are going to put you out there and they're going to say, I'm going to have you shadow one of our most successful reps for a couple of days. Or others will have a very intense training program that might look like first you're in sales training, then you come back, you spend a couple weeks in the field, you go back for more sales training. They're all going to look a little bit different, but as far as what you can expect coming in, expect that you want to prove yourself.
Yeah.
So put in the extra time. I mean, I had a sales manager who told me, we start our day at 7:30 a.m. And I think I might have been the only rep that actually did that. But it started with going by the donut shop and having, like, literally, I had 6 dozen donuts and I would take them to the offices. And I was always the first person to show up at those offices and those call points. And what that did is it helped differentiate me, and it helped me to be on pace then for that President's Club my first year, because I was doing things that not everybody else was willing to do. So I would say that first 30, 60, 90 days, you want to stand out. Go the extra mile. If your manager suggests something, take that suggestion, even if your car smells like a sweet, sweet donut shop every day. And trust me, it did.
Hey, there's worse things for it to smell like. No, but I think that's a great, taking that initiative, you're building the foundation for what the next 10, 15 years of your career looks like. And so not just doing those things to be noticed, but doing those things to build habit and build that foundation of this is what you do now. This is what success looks like. And when you start to see those little wins initially, I mean, there's nothing more motivating than that. So I think that's great advice.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Next, we're going to go to Travis. Travis, thanks for the question. How do years of clinical experience hold up for entry level med device roles? So if you're somebody, maybe, I think he's a respiratory therapist. It looks like looking at his credentials. So you don't have necessarily the sales experience, but you've been patient facing. You have what a business to business sales rep might lack in clinical knowledge. How do you go about translating that to a sales role and breaking in?
Yeah, and again, that comes back to every company is going to be different. Some hiring teams will say, absolutely, we'll hire somebody that has that kind of clinical experience, especially into an associate clinical specialist type of role. In other cases, if you are somebody who not only has that clinical experience, but you also just have that savviness, that personality, that drive, that initiative, that ability to connect with people and help get your kind of negotiate your way to achieving something like a true sales call, then you want to leverage both sides of that equation. So I would say, Travis, that some companies are going to say, no, we absolutely have to have that business to business experience. But others will say, heck yeah, we're open to it. If this guy brings this kind of experience, we'll take it and we'll teach him how to sell. So it's really going to be independent or dependent on the company that you're interviewing with.
Yeah, and one of the things, Travis, you have and other clinical folks have is you're in the hospital or the office and you have access to these reps
Yes.
day in, day out, and potentially managers, right? So you see a Medtronic rep walking by, you see a Stryker rep walking by, or you interact with them. Pull them aside and say, hey, I'm looking to break in. Help me out. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And that is going, we talked about it earlier, pursuing the job as a referral. Leave a good impression, as I'm sure you have over the years, on them. And they'll be the first to say, hey, we're looking for a new clinical. We're looking for a new associate rep. Let's pull in Travis.
Be like, I got the guy.
Right. So
Yes.
leverage that access and network that you've been able to build being in the hospital. And don't be afraid to ask for help. So I think that's great. Wrap it up. Okay, cool. Well, that's. I mean, I think we touched on pretty much everything. So not a ton of questions, which is great. If there's anybody viewing this later and you do have any questions that we didn't touch on, feel free to drop them in the comments, shoot an email or a direct message to me and Karen. We're happy to jump on a call and answer those for you. But hopefully you took a couple of nuggets out of this today, because it's difficult. And I know, as you had mentioned, it is definitely a marathon and not a sprint. And you can get 10, 15 no's or not hearing back trying to break in. But if you're consistently doing these activities and habits to break in, you're setting yourself up for success.
Yeah.
So
be patient, be persistent, and know that if it's the right opportunity for you, you'll land it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Karen, for shedding your insight. This was a lot of fun. And thank you, Floodgate family, for tuning in. And we will see you on the next edition of Improving Live.
Bye.